supply our region. What does it take to help a teenage girl living with cervical cancer? Making a nice cuppa, fetching a blanket, giving boy advice, and having a conversation about freezing her eggs in case the treatment leaves her infertile. We do whatever it takes to help people living with cancer. But we can only do it with your help. Donate online today at macmillan.org.uk. Macmillan Cancer Support. Whatever it takes.
You buy a treadmill, it has a mind of its own.
10, 15, 14.
Sadly, we can't help you run any faster. But when you pay with a Visa debit or credit card and the seller won't...
Hello, mate. Yeah. Bye.
Simon, I was keen to talk to you today about the news that emerged overnight that there will be an inquiry commission into the events on Capitol Hill just prior to the inauguration.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I think it's important to underscore, Sheila, that independent commissions of inquiry here are used less regularly than they are in the UK, for example. So this, if it happens, is going to be a big deal. Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, in the aftermath of Donald Trump's acquittal at his impeachment trial last week, followed as it was by the claims of the Republican leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, even though he voted to acquit, essentially saying that he believed Donald Trump was absolutely guilty as charged. Nancy Pelosi is now saying that what the country needs is an independent commission modeled after the one that investigated the Al-Qaeda attacks of September the 11th, 2001. It delivered a 585-page report, deeply researched, all sorts of witnesses being questioned and presented an array of recommendations for the country as to how it might be able to avoid being on the receiving end of a similar terror assault at a later date. So this would be a pretty hefty piece of work for someone to take on. If you take a listen to what Democrats are saying, they are lining up behind it because they believe it's an opportunity to hold Donald Trump and his conspiracy theory believing supporters to account for the violent insurrection on Capitol Hill that left 5 people dead on January the 6th. Congressman Ted Lieu of California is one of those Democrats who led the prosecution of Donald Trump in the Senate last week.
One of the things they're going to find is that Donald Trump incited an insurrection. Leading from that are a whole host of questions that we still don't know yet, such as how do we have such a massive breakdown in security? What other things could the Department of Homeland Security, for example, have done to try to prevent this attack? And there's just a lot of questions we have to delve into and look at the recommendations as how do we make our capital even
What did you do?
But just to give you a sense of how deep the divisions are here on this particular idea.
Went first where?
To the point, then to Bay Street, then to Julian's house.
Oh, right. How'd you get to Bay Street?
Cool.
And who booked it?
Me.
You booked school, did you? That's fair enough. Why not, eh? Why not? And you paid for your call on your card, yeah? Yeah. Have you got Bolt as well?
Yes.
Good.
Events together and say that was the day the Capitol Hill was raided. But if you break down the evidence of precisely what happened, and we saw a whisper of that, or a sort of echo of that in some of the extra CCTV that we saw in the impeachment process. But if, as with things like Bloody Sunday, as with things like Hillsborough, if you break it down into really giving individuals who were there on that day, involved in those events, a proper opportunity to say what they saw, to say what they experienced, it becomes an altogether different account. It becomes a real account. And in no way have we had a real, full account of those events.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think that one of the questions, however, about this process is whether it's possible in the highly polarized atmosphere in which we live in the United States, and in an environment now that is increasingly dominated by the distinction between those people who are interested in facts and those people who hew to conspiracy theories and what Donald Trump's former strategist Kellyanne Conway referred to as alternative facts.
I should have gone the other way, you know.
Investigation be seen as truly independent and, you know, the gold standard for coming up with an agreed truth about any event? I think that, you know, in many ways this goes to the heart of the story that is going to unfold here over the next 4 years. Can the United States find its way back to a place where politicians of both the major parties in Congress can stipulate to an agreed set of facts? And at the moment, I mean, you heard Senator Johnson there insisting this wasn't an armed insurrection. It plainly was an armed insurrection. There's no other possible construction that in a fact-based environment you can put on it. But members of the Senate like him, like Ted Cruz from Texas, like Josh Hawley from Missouri, have no intention of ever embracing facts.
Yeah, but if you line up officer after officer after officer, senator after senator after senator to describe in detail, in terms, what happened to them, whether it was being beaten, having eyes gouged out, being rammed against doors, hunted down, sat on, squashed, trampled, you know, that detail matters.
I couldn't agree with you more. I just think it's going to become a very interesting litmus test for whether this country can still get its arms around the concept of the output of an independent investigation, or whether it all simply just becomes more grist for a highly polarized, not always fact-based political mill here.
Thank you, Simon. Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent. Let me just read a couple of texts, actually, before I hand over to Eddie. At 4.
Mind you, it was heavy traffic the other way as well. Yeah, because I came the other way.
Cancelled. My youngest son, 28, just decided to push it back a year to July the 21st, but my eldest son's fiance wanted to get married before her 30th birthday, March the 21st. So they've now rearranged 4 times. Oh, the current date is now May, but it's not looking good, says this texter. We moved 70 weddings with our camper van photo booths last year, and found ourselves moving all our poor spring brides for a second time. Some couples are pushing back for 3 years. No roadmap still, all so and so. That's from Naomi in Vintage Camper Booths, who manages to name a company on you, Naomi. You know, you're probably in a bit of trouble these days. So I'm religious and I won't live with my spouse before I'm married. I miss them a lot, but I'm very stressed about when my wedding will be. Will London open up soon? I'm planning to get married in April. I hope I won't need to cancel again, says Judith. There are a number of exclamation marks in that text. Quite a number. I'll leave you to ponder why that might be. Coming up at 7 tonight, it's Ian Dale, but right now here on LBC.
Thanks, Sheila. It's 4 o'clock. Here are the headlines. 1.7 million more people added to England's shielding list.
It comes after new Oxford University research looked at people's risk factors, and those people will also be prioritised for vaccines.
Scotland schools to return.
In keeping with the advice of our expert group, this first phase of the reopening of schools will go ahead as planned on Monday.
New Labour questions over claims of COVID cronyism.
Labour is demanding answers over what it says is £2 billion worth of coronavirus contracts given to companies with close links to the Conservatives.
Also tonight, LBC's Daniel Bevan on the illegal house parties of Cardiff.
We've been given exclusive access to officers tasked with enforcing the coronavirus regulations, including breaking up illegal gatherings.
Also ahead, your COVID report and coronavirus 1 year ago today.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
1.7 million more people in England have been added to the coronavirus shielding list. Experts have identified adults who may suffer worse symptoms if they catch COVID-19. They will get priority access to vaccines if they've not already had one. Nicola Sturgeon set out plans for a phased return to schools in Scotland next week, and she says other lockdown measures will stay in place there and is advising people against planning an Easter break. 4 people have been fined £10,000 after arriving at Birmingham Airport without declaring they travelled from a red list country in the past 10 days. West Midlands police say they attempted to hide their routes.
You know, when you book a call like that and you pay for it, do you bother to get money off your friends or not?
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Edinburgh.
Do they have the same facility? Can they book a car or not?
You tonight because plans to ensure freedom of speech on campuses. He wants a free speech champion to regulate free speech. Here's some of the detail. Universities would be required by law to actively promote free speech, and institutions could be fined if they don't. Student unions would also have to ensure there was lawful free speech for members and visiting speakers. Anyone who felt they suffered a loss from a breach of the rules, such as being expelled, our democratic society and our universities have a long and proud history being places where students and academics can express themselves freely, challenge views, and cultivate an open mind. But I'm deeply worried about the chilling effect on campuses of unacceptable silencing and censoring. That is why we must strengthen free speech in higher education by bolstering the existing legal duties and ensuring strong, robust actions taken if these are breached. The words of Gavin Williams. I'm wondering, if you are at university, is that what you want to hear today from Gavin Williams? There's no doubt, I'm sure we can all agree, freedom of speech matters. It's not something we can ever take for granted. And there's been controversy about silencing, no platforming. Tell me, if you are at it, is this what you want Gavin Williams to be talking about today? If not, what should we be talking about? 0345 6060973. Would you rather hear from him about what's happening to you in university education? Online learning, replacing lectures. Maybe you've moved back home and you're still forking out for pressure. Many students told us they're angry about paying full tuition fees while university life was far from what they expected. So tell me, is Gavin Williams right to be focusing today on freedom of speech on campus? Or as a student, do you think that in this moment, with COVID turning university life on its head, it's the wrong thing? It's a good moment to check in with what's happening with our universities. We often talk about schools, and whenever we talk about universities, we always say,
you got enough money on your card?
Freedom of speech. If you're at uni, education.
You better ask Mum for some more, yeah?
It's also your freedom of speech. What do you think of Gavin Williamson's priorities? 0345 6060973. You can text 84850 and tweet at LBC. Teddy Cowley is co-editor-in-chief of Edinburgh, the University of Bristol's student newspaper. He's also a third-year student at the uni. Welcome. What did you think when Gavin Williamson popped up again today?
Well, thank you, Eddie, for having me. And we recognise the issues that students are going through that you just listed there. This is not top of the agenda for students. There's a bit of a mismatch between sort of this announcement today and what students are actually going through. Many students actually aren't even on campus. We don't even have access to these sorts of talks that, might be no platform of the sort, or we haven't had them for, quite a long time. It seems to be a sort of quick win in this sort of culture war against the woke culture, but it doesn't really seem to try and win some of the issues that we're actually going through. Access to resources. Let's not kind of end the debate on tuition. Bring the conversation back to universities.
In terms of the issues he's been raising at Bristol, what's been happening?
There was I mean, over the weekend, for instance, as an example, there was one of our professors has made comments in which he called for an end to Zionism as a functioning ideology of the world. This particular professor has called up, provoked sort of issues before and caused offence to many Jewish students. And what I suppose is a difficulty in Gavin Williamson's announcement today is that presumably this free speech champion would sort of promote that or allow for that. So it kind of, this free speech champion comes in and mandates universities to what they can and can't do, and would fine them for sort of taking action when there might be instances where some students have been offended by speakers, such as in this example.
So this is an interesting topic that you would want to have explored, but it's just the wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's a matter of priorities. There are lots of issues facing students at the moment. I myself, like many students, are currently not on campus. As I say, there's still the debate around tuition fees and the mental health impacts that have affected students throughout the year and continue to, and also the impact on teachers. We don't doubt for a minute that our teachers work really, really, really hard and are under enormous pressure. So it just feels a slightly odd time and a bit of a mismatch with what students are actually going through to try and promote this sort of free speech agenda, when really it's an issue that's sort of blown out of proportion to some extent.
Thanks for talking to us. That's Teddy Cowd, co-editor-in-chief of Epigram, the University of Bristol's student newspaper. Wherever you might be at university in the UK or whichever campus you're supposed to be on, is this the right topic for now? Gavin Williamson's raised it, and there's no doubt it's been an issue. It is a current issue. But is this what he should be talking about today? Tell me what you're going through with your university education. What would you like to see him talk about, if not this? 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850, tweet at LBC. Gavin Williamson chooses to return, talking about free speech. It says this listener, this is nothing more than the Tories tossing little red meat to their base. Instead, he should be announcing he's finally found missing laptops he promised poor school children. Maya Goodfellow is an academic at the University of Sheffield. How are you tonight? Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, freedom of speech, as I said at the beginning, I think we can all agree we can't take it for granted. We should talk about it, and clearly it's been an issue, particularly on campuses. Is there anything wrong with England's Education Secretary standing up one day and this, it matters, here are my proposals?
Yes, I think we need to contextualise this. I agree. Obviously, free speech is really important. I work in university, and when I've taught, like all of my colleagues, what I've been focused on is encouraging debate in the classroom, exploring different schools of thought. But I do think that this is a conducted row. We have so many pieces of legislation already on free speech in universities, the 1968 Education Act, the Higher Education and Research Act of 2017, and there really isn't much robust evidence for this being a widespread issue in the way that Gavin Williamson seems to be talking about it. And so one thing that I would sort of point to is a 28 report by the Parliamentary Human Rights Committee, which said they did not find wholesale censorship of debate in universities, which the media coverage has suggested. And so I think we do need to cherish free speech and think about the importance of free speech and look at individual cases, yes, but I don't think that this is the widespread major issue on university campuses that Gavin Williamson is suggesting.
Is there any harm in having what he calls a free speech champion?
I mean, I suppose it depends on what exactly this looks like, and I sort of go back to what this seems to be rooted in, which is I do think the government seem to have this tendency to want to create these kinds of convected rows, whether it's about statues or whether it's about people trying to seek asylum or crossing the channel. This seems to be another sort of attempt to create a big row around an issue that we could talk much more sensibly about. So I want to see exactly what this looked like and exactly why there needs to be this sort of addition when we do have existing pieces of legislation around this.
But confected is an interesting word, isn't it? All the examples you've just given, there's real disagreement on all of those. What's confected about those disagreements?
So I think part of it is that often it's sort of, we find one instance and then we sort of blow it out of proportion. So I think statues is quite a good example. Yes, I suppose there's a debate. Often the way that debate is framed, lots of anti-racist activists are concerned with all around around the UK, because there's one important instance of the slave trader being pulled down in Bristol, which I think did matter. But actually what a lot of people are concerned around is things like racial inequality, how that manifests in material inequalities, what that means in terms of health outcomes if we look at COVID. And so when I say convected, I think the government wants to sort of draw this line in the sand, position themselves in one way that sort of plays to their base, and it raises all these other issues. So, you know, your previous caller was talking about the issues that students are facing. There's so many issues in higher education at the moment, whether that be huge tuition fees when I think education should be free, whether that be high rents, students being forced to, having to go to pay huge amounts in university accommodation, or whether that be casualisation across the sector. You know, lots of early career researchers, lots of teachers are on really insecure, poor paid contracts. That's something that's sort of raised in our higher education debate, but that tends to be disproportionately women and people of colour who are in these really poor paid contracts. And so I want to talk about the marketisation of higher education, the damage that's done to our education system. But that's never really where this debate goes. I think we get bogged down often in the way that the government frames it. So we have this debate around whether free speech is a major issue on university campuses or not, and we never really get to these other material issues that I think are incredibly important.
Thanks for talking to us. Maya, good